Okay, my name is Lawrence McGlynn, and you are listening to the award-winning Philadelphia Hall Monitor on WPPM 106.5 FM, on Comcast Channel 66, and streaming live at phillycam.org. You can find us on Twitter at Hall Monitor WPPM, on our website www.hallmonitor.org, or on Facebook at PHM WPPM. Tonight on the program, we'll be joined by Lisa Haber to get us caught up on recent school board happenings. And Vanessa Maria Graber will update us on the Eddie Azziari case as well as national news. So I'd like to bring in Lisa Haber to open things up with us. Lisa, how are you tonight?
Good. Good to see you, Larry.
Thank you. You had a piece in the Hall Monitor newsletter that came out yesterday. Can you give us get us started with that? What are some of the things that you covered there?
Well, Larry, mostly talking, unfortunately, about the board's move. I'm avoiding the word plan at the moment, but their move to close more public schools. And when I say more, there are many people, including me, who do remember the devastation that was caused in 2013 when the School Reform Commission, then the governing body of the district, closed 23 neighborhood schools. And it was devastating. And I don't think there'll be a time when we are not still feeling that devastation. So it's baffling that the Board of Education now is moving to close more public schools. And I open by saying, and this is true. Cheryl Parker was not my first choice for mayor. I didn't vote for her in the primary. And I knew people who didn't even want to vote for it in the general election for a number of reasons. I think the law and order message was a little heavy, but I did vote for her. And I told people the reason I voted for her was because she came out in 2012 and 2013 when she was a state representative, and there were not that many elected officials out there. She was out there. You know, her district was in Northwest Philadelphia, as was her councilmanic district. And she came to the meetings, and truly, there actually were 3 schools, I'm pretty sure, that were saved. Stanton, Shepherd, and McCluskey. McCluskey's in Parker's district, and they took that school off the list. So that meant a lot to me that Parker was out there. And that's why I'm so disappointed that her school board that she appoints all the members of and that she controls. We don't have local control, as people often say. We have a mayoral controlled school board. So when they are moving to close schools, that is at the direction of the mayor. And it's so disappointing because it really was the one reason that put me over the top. And I said, I'll never forget that she came out. And now we're looking down the barrel again.
So what is the rationale? And I know that the answer is going to be money, right? So
it's not, believe it or not, but
okay.
But go ahead, finish your question. But it's
Well, that's the first part. What is the explanation given for even considering closing some schools?
I wish I knew. And that is one of the points that we, the Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools, and other people too, are. I have said this in my articles, and I've said this in testimony of the board. We have yet to be told the reason why. And they make a point, the administration and the board makes a point of saying this is not about finances. And the truth is, it really wasn't about finances in 2013 either, because even though then Superintendent William Haidt had this figure, 22 million, we're going to save 22 million, we're going to save $22 million after those schools closed, and you have relocation costs and other costs, it was actually less than half of that. So it's really not about money. They're saying it's not about money now. So what is it about? We're not getting that answer. We're being told things like the average age of a school building in Philadelphia is over 70, 73, I think they said, years old. Like, so what?
Yeah.
As I said, so's Mother Bethel Church and City Hall and Independence Hall. Is it the condition of the building? The age really? I worked in, I taught middle school in the district, and there were a number of schools that were open as junior highs and then became middle schools. And the buildings that I worked at Harding Middle School in East Frankfort and Roosevelt in Germantown. They were the same building. There were a number of schools that were built at that time, and they're beautiful buildings, with the marble staircase and really a really nice place for kids to come and go to school. And they're sturdy.
Hmm.
Now, if they're maintained and they're kept well, then they can last indefinitely.
Yeah.
Maybe some of the newer schools with newer construction materials and construction methods, you may not be able to say that about. These are solid, like brick and stone and marble schools. So we're being told things that really are not relevant. And then we're also hearing about under enrollment. Some schools are over enrolled, some schools are under enrolled. That is true. And over the past 10 years at least, we've seen a big enrollment explosion in Northeast Philadelphia. And they've had to they opened a new Lincoln, that was years ago. And they opened a new school to basically replace Austin Mead, which was closed in 2013. But there are a number of schools that are under enrolled. But we do point out that over half of the charter schools operating in Philadelphia today are under enrolled.
Right.
And some
Right.
significantly, some are like 40, 50, 60% under enrolled. So that really couldn't be a criteria either. Also, many of the charter schools are now in buildings that were originally district buildings that were closed. They're not part of this plan. There's so many inconsistencies here. So when you say why, honestly, I don't know.
So now, looking at it from the perspective of an educator, when considering the students, how disruptive is it if they lose their community school? What happens there for the kids?
It's so disruptive, and I will give you a memory from 2020. They started the process in 2012, and then the SRC voted in April 2013. We, APS and the coalition of organizations fighting to stop the school closings then were making trips to members of city council. And I don't remember which council member it was, but we came in and we were waiting for the council member to come out. We were going to talk to her or him maybe. And we talked to somebody who worked in that office. And she actually showed us a scrapbook. I believe it was Taylor, which is no longer around. She had a scrapbook and showed pictures from when her mother went to the school, when she went to the school, and now she had two children in the school at the time that it closed. And I was astounded. But she had articles and pictures and just this was so much a part of their family's memory. And that school closed. And I think about her a lot, that this school meant so much to her and her 3 generations at least of her family. It is really devastating. And as I pointed out, then there were a lot of children whose journeys to school, morning and afternoon, were longer. And I remember, Dr. Height at the time saying, "Oh, we're going to have safe corridors and we're going to get people out there." I don't think that lasted a week. That there were neighborhood people out in these safe corridors helping these children. Honestly, Larry, that's my memory. It definitely did not last a month. It might have been a week or two, and then it was, over. So it is devastating because schools are not just schools; they're community anchors. In the same way the library is and a rec center, it's so much a part of that community that it's really hard to measure the loss. And I did point out Germantown High School, beautiful building. Uh, there was recently a book written by Dr. Erica Kitzmiller on the history of Germantown High School. And, that neighborhood's changed. It's had a different demographic, different population. But for most of its years, I believe it was really an integrated school. Uh, that school was 99 years old. They were getting ready to celebrate their 100th anniversary when the School Reform Commission closed them down. It was heartbreaking. Yeah. And I was at those meetings. APS members were there. We had, parents and educators who had retired from Germantown came to the meetings. These schools really mean a lot to people. Yeah. They're not using that corporate, right sizing term, because this was their home. One of our members, Linda Rubin, was a school counselor. She spent 38 years at the same school in South Philadelphia. You go downtown with Linda, you are going to run into somebody, or you go to the 9th Street Market, you will run into somebody who comes up to Linda, who knows Linda. The kid was at the school, they were at the school. That means a lot to people, that they know who's at that school, and they know somebody who's known them and their kids and even their parents. It's not just a building. It means a lot to people. And it's very upsetting that, we got rid of the SRC, we brought in the Board of Education, and now they're doing the same thing. Like they for the first time since the board came back in 2018, they approved a new charter application. As I said, half of the charter schools in the city are under-enrolled. Many are performing below basic academic standards. There was no reason to approve a new charter school, especially since you are now talking about closing an indeterminate number, Larry, because when you say why, the other questions that haven't been answered are how many. We have no idea how many. None.
Well, and to your point, I spend a lot of time at City Hall. Building's 157 years old.
Right.
And listen, I'm not going to say it's the Taj Mahal.
I love City Hall. It's great.
I love it. I love the place. Yeah. But listen, it's not the most aesthetically pleasing building on the inside, but it's functional.
I would know. We could talk about this later, but there's some interesting things in City Hall.
I know.
It was built with love.
But that's my point, right?
Yeah.
These buildings were built to last.
Yes.
And if they're maintained, well, you get a City Hall. It's still there.
Yeah.
And it still works.
Beautiful building. People take tours of because it's so beautiful. Yeah. Many of the school buildings are built to last. But when I talked about in the article going to this latest round of district meetings in the community, and originally the district had only scheduled some community meetings back in the fall of 2024. And they hadn't scheduled any meetings until the board is going to make its final decision. We don't know exactly when, but we think November or December of 2025. That's a whole year. And we were saying, wait a minute, you're not listening to people. Oh, well, we're doing surveys and we have committees. Well, those committees were appointed by the district administration and or the board. I'm not sure who appointed them, but they're district appointed. They're not open to the public. You can't. You have they have 9 altogether. Not one of them is open to the public. So if the education council or some other council's meeting, you can't go. You can't. You don't know what they're saying about your school, and you don't get to say anything to them about your school. Mm-hmm. We filed an official right to know request with the district, and we cited the Sunshine Act, which Larry, APS knows a lot about Sunshine Act. We've sued a couple times about the Sunshine Act, and we specifically said here's section 701c3 of the Sunshine Act, and it says that it's not just the governing body, but any committee appointed by the governing body which has a function in which they will advise the governing body in making a decision. It's clear as day. There's no in the weeds there. Any committee that the governing body appoints that is going to contribute to their decision is covered by the Sunshine Act. We were denied anyway. So, where's the community engagement? The great thing is that one of those committees just decided not to go along with the program. Penn professor Akira Drake Rodriguez, who's been very active for years. I've known Akira for years. She organized the Healthy Schools Coalition. She's been part of a lot of efforts mostly from West Philadelphia. And she and the people on that committee, they'd ask for information, they didn't get it. Now, this was all documented in Chalkbeat. Asking for information, didn't get it, meeting scheduled, then canceled at the last minute. And so they really felt that they weren't there on this committee to serve the district. They were there on that committee to serve the people. So they went public with their concerns. So that after APPS made an issue of it, and after the members of that committee made an issue, they scheduled more meetings in the community. Great. Okay. But when they build them as conversations, that was not exactly true.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would say APPS members went to between 8 and 10. They're all the same, different locations. I happen to be at the one in Blueford Elementary in Overbrook. And like, here's the 9-page, packet that we got, and charts and like showing the different schools, and then these ratings of like program alignment, which I was a teacher. I had to ask what that was. School building score, and then neighborhood vulnerability category were three of the categories. And then there's numbers assigned. So much of the time in the meeting was spent having district staff explain to people what these numbers were about and how they were already assigned numbers when you got there. Like, what does it mean that, say, Martha Washington School neighborhood vulnerability category? What does that mean? And ironically, part of the neighborhood vulnerability category is that school near the location of a school that the district closed in 2013.
Yeah.
And then the questions that were asked by the district staff were of the people who were there, specifically about all the data they just gave us. And then you can see it in the picture that's with my report in Hall Monitor. Then they'll plot the points, on a graph. It's like, I asked, Linda Rubin was at one at South Warwick and McDaniel, and we all asked the same thing. Like, at what point in this meeting that was billed as a conversation does the conversation start? Like, because as soon as you come in, they put you in a small group. And we said, well, okay, when does a larger group get together so we can hear what people's concerns are? And we were told that's not part of the program. It really was not a conversation. You couldn't call it a conversation. Yeah. So if you want to say there's community engagement, you have to have real community engagement.
Yeah.
You can't have closed committees. You can't say we have a survey. That's not community engagement. And at the same time, the same speaker suppression is going on at the board meetings.
So this is what you're saying here is a general theme of a lot of the stories we run here on Hall Monitor, unfortunately.
Yeah.
From various aspects of city government. It's very troubling when you ask a legitimate question like, hey, what schools are we closing down? And nobody, well, hey, we got to figure that out. Well, what criteria are you using? We're working on that. And then one day it'll be, well, these are the 7 or 8 we chose, or whatever the number is. Well, how'd you choose them? Well, we had a criteria. Can you give that to us? Well, we'll get it to you. And then, you never, you know,
Oh, we're going to get a very elaborate explanation that
yes.
the members of the 9 committees, which unfortunately for them has already had the curtain pulled back on it. These 9 committees came up with this. And then there's a special committee called the Team Project Committee, which is like kind of like the VIP committee. And bafflingly, there's 2 people on that committee who are charter school CEOs, which makes no sense at all. And then they'll tell us, oh, we aggregated all the data from this committee, that committee, the team project, and then we looked at our surveys. I'm sure it's going to sound good, but when you go to the meeting and you see what happens, you realize that this is the illusion of public engagement. It looks good on paper, got a bunch of committees, got a bunch of surveys, and we went out to different schools. But when you're there and you say, well, when is the time that everybody's going to, because I'd like to hear from the people whose kids go to Blueford here. No, we didn't hear from them.
Would this have anything to do with staffing issues?
What do you mean? That
the closing of the potential closing of schools? Maybe they're worried that they're stretched too thin in some places.
They have not said that. I mean, there is an ongoing talk. I don't want to say discussion. There's very little discussion among the board members at action meetings, but that topic has been raised. But one of their talking points when you go to, and as I said, APS members have been to a lot of them, so we're hearing the same talking points. But one of them that they open with is, our goal here in this facilities project planning is to make sure that students and families can have more services. So obviously the question would be, how would the people of Philadelphia have more services with fewer schools?
That doesn't make any sense. No.
Yeah. So in 2013, in the 12 years since then, because this year they've been putting out information as part of their talking points. Where they got this, I have no idea where. The district has saved $24 million every year since they closed all those schools. And I'm just going to say this, that's an absolute lie. That is not true at all. And when you push them a little bit, that just crumbles. That's just a lie. Even Dr. Haidt didn't say that. When he said 22 million, he meant like one time 22 million. So that's just a lie. I don't want to say that too often, but not true.
Yeah, well, if it's demonstrably false, then that's what we're,
Yeah, and if they say, well, we're going to, okay, since 2013, are there more school librarians or fewer? Because right now we have 3 full-time school librarians. Do we have more
for the entire district? I want to make that clear.
For the 214 schools.
Yep.
Yes, and 2 out of the 3 are at magnet schools. We have more art and music since they closed those schools? No, we do not. If they really did have more services, more resources, we would know about it. It'd be part of their presentation.
Yeah.
No, the children have not gotten more services and resources.
Well,
what they got is like eyesores at the end of their street and their neighborhood, and they have to go by the school that they went to. My high school closed a couple years ago.
Yeah.
I haven't been to that school in many, many years. It still hurt.
Yeah.
What's it like, when you went to school and then you go to a different school, all new teachers, half of the kids that were your friends aren't with you. I mean, it's really devastating on so many levels. And there just really is not a definitive reason. And they have said, this is not a financial reason.
And that's the thing I can't understand. I would think that would have to be, because the district never has enough money, so that would be the only impetus for reducing services, that is to save money. But if that's not the case, then there's no other reason for it that I can see.
Yeah, I mean, we have not gotten a comprehensive, honest statement about why schools are closing. We just really haven't. And as I said, you could maybe try to believe what they're saying or make some kind of sense out of it, except that we have many, many charter schools. More than half of the charter schools are under enrolled, some significantly, but they're not being looked at as part of this plan. It's only the 214 district run schools, but it's hard to have a voice. Let's say you can't get to any of these meetings, or you go to the meeting and you say, well, they're not listening to me. Then you try to speak to the board. There's only 30 people allowed.
Yeah.
On the primary, there's a waiting list, but only a few people on the waiting list going to. So even when you go to a board meeting, your chances of being heard at the board meeting are diminished. And as I wrote in the apps report, at the June action meeting, 24 out of the 30 people on the list who got up to speak were representing charter schools. 24 of 30.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So even their ongoing speaker suppression is diminishing people's ability to be heard on the school closings.
I don't really. None of this adds up, and that's another thing I feel like we say on the show sometimes. It doesn't add up the right way.
We have a board that doesn't talk.
Yeah.
And I have said that before. And when we write our report, when APS puts out its report, like in the last one, we pointed out that at the end of the meeting, and there were 50 action items totaling $309 million in public taxpayer spending. That took 1 minute for the board to vote on that. And there was not 1 minute of deliberation. There was not a word exchanged about any of this. 50 action items, $309 million. And it was just like, but that's not unusual. That happens at just about every meeting. There's no discussion at all about the official action that they are taking.
So the decisions regarding the potential closing of some schools, you're saying November or December, we'll know more?
When the SRC did this in 2012 and 13, people had months. They notified people months before they took the vote. So we knew in fall of 2012 what schools were on the list. And if you recall, that was from the Boston Consulting Group. We do have a consulting group now. It's a different one, but a consulting group that they're paying money to is part of this. But we did have to fight to see all the names, and that was a fight that Helen Gim waged before she was on city council. But we knew the names of them. You could show up, you could lobby your council person, you could organize the way they have this scheduled now is the committees are going to give their reports, I believe it is September, it might be October, and then they're going to take the final vote November, maybe December. There is a very small window between the time, because when the committees report, it'll probably take another couple weeks for the board to then compile the list based on what those committees have said to them. There's going to be possibly only 1 month between the time that people know that their school's being targeted and the time that the board votes.
That makes it easier for the board, right? Because that means,
I guess.
yeah.
But when I think about some of the other things that we've seen gone down in the city, and I mean, mostly, what some people are now calling a renegade, and how there was a lot of community engagement, but in terms of the leadership of the city listening to people, not so much. Not so
No.
much.
The
And then
engagement we saw, came from different places. Yeah.
yeah, and then we got played, totally played.
Hmm.
And I'm still waiting, by the way, Larry, may I say, I'm still waiting for my apology from the mayor and city council for what they did to people. And I don't even live in Chinatown.
Yeah, it's
But
gonna be a while. Gonna be a
yeah,
while on that.
I'll keep waiting for that. But we really do need one. We need a really strong coalition of organizations fighting against these school closings, and we need the members of city council to take a stand. And I have not heard a definitive statement from anybody in city council saying we are against the school closings. That has not happened.
No.
In
Well,
2012, our coalition got 15 of the 17 members of city council to sign on to it was a non-binding resolution, but they took a stand. They came out and said, no, this is not going to be good. We really need the leadership of city council to step up.
well, and that's one of the things that might make this a little easier for the school board, right? If you go into November, like maybe the end of November, maybe around Thanksgiving, and you put your list out, doesn't give people a lot of time to react, and the council
Right.
members will hear it from their constituents. We don't want the school closed. We don't want the school closed. But if you do a quick turnaround meeting, maybe early mid-December,
Yeah,
and
there won't be
say
enough time.
sorry, we didn't have enough time.
But
We had to get this done. We had a deadline.
Well, I mean, they're not. I mean, you have to pay attention and look at the timeline, but it's there. I mean, it's right there on their timeline.
Yeah.
That they are going to have this little tiny window.
Yep.
So
that
makes it could be
yeah.
12 schools, it could be 20 schools, it could be we don't know. We have no idea.
Yeah.
It is frightening, and it's true. It'll sort of make it easier for the board, but in the long run, will it? I mean, people have to believe in their government. We're having a crisis. People believing in their government under this president.
Yeah.
And that makes it even more essential for people to be able to believe that their local government is looking out for them. As I said, I've been to just about every board meeting and SRC meeting before that, like since the 90s. I've never seen any member of the community, parent, educator, come in and say, what we really need to do? We need to close some more schools.
Yeah, no, nobody ever says that.
Nobody ever says that.
No.
They say we need more librarians. We need more counselors. We need this. We need, our principal's a problem. Never have anybody from the community come in and say, you know what? Why don't you close my kid's school?
Yeah.
So who is city council representing, and who was the mayor representing? I mean, her big campaign education campaign position was about year-round school. Okay, got some issues with that, but the message was we're going to give our kids and our families and our communities more.
Yeah, and with that,
he didn't say anything on the campaign trail about closing schools.
No, and that year-round school thing turned out. And, again, you can have qualms with it, but it was, more like enrichment, I would say, right? Like over the summer, it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But as an option,
I think even if she was thinking we should close schools, that would not have been a winning message during a
No,
mayoral campaign. So I
no.
feel like a little bait and switch here, that you said you wanted to give people more, a longer school year. All right. Maybe it's not exactly what we had all pictured, but it's more. The mayor, when she ran, didn't say anything about less. We need fewer schools. We're going to combine schools. We're going to close schools. That was not mentioned. And I
No.
think the mayor really does owe people an explanation about that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So when is the next school board meeting?
Next school board meeting, August 21st. There's no board meeting in July.
Okay.
The board meeting is August 21st. There's a committee meeting, goals and guardrails, on August 7th. Before that, so yeah, it's going to be crucial for people to come out. And I did relate in my apps report, we again had a problem getting people into the auditorium.
Yeah.
Because when you are not on the speaker list and there's a lot of people there, then they instruct the security staff to say, if you're on the list, you can go up. And if you're not on the list, you got to wait in the atrium. Even though they took 100 chairs out of the auditorium and have not put them back yet. There's plenty of room. There's no reason for anybody to be in the atrium. There's plenty of room in the auditorium. So all of this is of a piece of this board is not allowing for public engagement. They talk a lot about it, but there's so many ways that APP sees by being regular attendees of these meetings. There's so many ways. Even when you talk about chairs and people think you're goofy, like, well, who cares about chairs? Because now they have 100 fewer people in the auditorium. They make them wait downstairs. And if they're downstairs, they're watching a screen, they're not participating. Can't hold up the sign, if you're downstairs.
It's not the same thing at all.
No.
None of it adds up. Again, I feel like we keep saying that, but it's true. I don't understand this.
It doesn't. But really, the answer is people need to get out. I mean, we're seeing like rallies. The Indivisible rally was last week. I spoke at that rally. People are coming out, because they're so afraid of this president, rightly so. And it's great that people come out, but we really do need people to come out and tell their city council members and tell this Board of Education and tell the mayor, we cannot afford to lose any more public schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we don't have time, but we could start talking about how schools are a sanctuary in an age when people are being abducted off the street by their government.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
And again, we don't have a whole lot of time. What are they going to do about the SEPTA cuts?
That's a whole other thing, because a lot of students rely on SEPTA as their school bus. Right. It's going to be a major issue.
It really is.
So where can people learn more about apps?
Alliance for Philadelphia Public Schools. We are on, we have our website, apps.philly. We're on Blue Sky. We're on Threads. I'm on social media. You can always find me. And if you can come to the board meeting, we're always there. We love to have more people out there.
All right, Lisa Haber, thank you so much.
Thanks, Larry.
All right, and now we'd like to bring on Vanessa Maria Graber to talk a little bit about some of the recent happenings around the city and the nation. Vanessa, how are you tonight?
Hi, Larry. I'm good, thank you.
It's good to see you as always. So why don't we get started right on the Eddie Izziari case? Sort of a shock last week. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so this is a story we've been following at the Hall Monitor for the last 2 years, so since the very beginning. And again, for our listeners and viewers who are not familiar with the story, Eddie Izziari is a young Puerto Rican man living in Kensington who was shot and killed by police officer Mark Dial back in July, at the end of July in 2023. During that time, Mark Dial and his partner, another police officer, claimed that Eddie Irizarry was driving erratically. They followed him. He went the wrong way on a one-way street, and then they got out of their car, and they alleged that he got out of his car and pulled a knife at them. Later, body camera footage revealed that he, in fact, never left the vehicle. He stayed in his car, and 6 seconds after Mark Dial came out of his vehicle, he then shot several times into Eddie Irizarry's vehicle, fatally wounding him. He then took him to the hospital where he was later pronounced dead. At some point, Mark Dial and his partner fabricated a story that was later found to be untrue by both the body camera footage and surveillance footage from homes on that street in Kensington. And so as a result, there was an incredible amount of uproar, anger, outrage from the Puerto Rican community in Philadelphia, putting pressure on the district attorney's office to file charges. Later, Mark Dial was officially charged with murder. That charge was later reduced because of an error that the district attorney's office made by not sharing all of the evidence from an expert witness. That charge was later reduced to murder in the second degree. And the district attorney also filed several other charges, including involuntary manslaughter. And so that case finally went to trial this year, this spring. It lasted about 1 week. You know, I was there on the scene at the courthouse at the Criminal Justice Center to cover that case. There was a protest outside attended by families of the family of Eddie Irizarry and community members organized by Philly PSL, where again, they were demanding accountability for this crime and hoping to get a guilty verdict. The jury found Mark Dial guilty of voluntary manslaughter and other charges that were a lot lesser. And sentencing occurred last week. And so he was sentenced to 9.5 months to 2 years in jail for shooting and killing Eddie Irizarry. And the sentence was handed down from Common Pleas Court Judge Glenn B. Bronson. And it's concerning because it fell years below the state's guidelines for conviction for voluntary manslaughter. And he also ordered that former officer Dial be immediately paroled because he'd already spent 10 months in jail. So that basically meant that he got to walk free after his sentencing hearing, and he is now on parole, which is a form of supervised release. And so I want to play a clip from the district attorney's office. This is Larry Krasner. He held a press conference a few days ago on July 17th, responding to the sentencing guidelines. And he does explain why these sentencing guidelines are far below what the state recommends. And he talks about what his office actually asked for. They asked for about 5.5 years to 8.5 years, I believe. So let's see if we can share our screen. That's the wrong one. Hold on, let's try that again. We are live, and so sometimes we have
technical issues.
Technical difficulties. All right, here it is, right here. All right.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for being here. We have arranged this press availability in the wake of the sentencing hearing of ex-police officer Mark Dial after he was convicted of criminal homicide, more specifically voluntary manslaughter, in the killing of a young man named Eddie Irizarry, who was shot to death seated in his car with the windows rolled up, who had no firearm on him at any point before he was killed, who did not try to exit the vehicle, but was nonetheless shot to death. And in the process, Officer Mark Dial, who's also convicted of recklessly endangering another person, endangered his partner, who was standing on the other side of the vehicle when one bullet after another was fired through these rolled up windows at Eddie Irizarry. The sentence that was handed down today is not one with which I agree, and I say that respectfully to Judge Bronson, who rendered this sentence, and we will talk about that shortly. We are standing here with survivors, co-survivors, people who have suffered trauma because of the criminal killing of Eddie Irizarry. They are literally next to us. We are standing here because we stand for even-handed justice. We stand for equal treatment. We stand for a system in which people can have faith. We stand for a system that is not a caste system, C-A-S-T-E, system, a system in which some people are treated better than others just because of who they are. There's nothing new in the criminal justice system about rich people being treated better than broke people, about famous people being treated better than people who are not famous. There is nothing new about white people being treated better than black and brown people. And there's nothing new, sadly, about the status of a defendant, whether that status involves wearing a uniform or not. There's nothing new about that being unequal, but everything I just said has always been wrong, and it is wrong today, and it always has been that way. Let me briefly introduce you to some of the folks who are here, and then we will have a little bit more to say. We have with us today Zoraida Garcia, who is the aunt of Eddie Irizarry. We have with us Maricelis Garcia, who is the cousin of Eddie Irizarry. We have Wanda Garcia, aunt of Eddie Irizarry. Nelson Dorgan, who is the cousin of Eddie Irizarry. And we also have, because the family has a civil matter relating to this, we also have Dial McAllister Esquire, who is of the office of Attorney Shaka Johnson, and who is here to support the family and present with us. So let's talk about what actually happened, if we may, as we stand here one more time with co-survivors of murder after there's an outcome in the case. What occurred today was a sentencing hearing before Judge Bronson. Judge Bronson is someone I have known for many, many years. He is a hardworking individual. He is intelligent. He does his research. And as with all judges, I say this truthfully, I have great respect for the independence of the judiciary. Judge Bronson is also well known for giving long sentences. The sentencing guidelines that applied in this case, and please correct me if I get this wrong, 54 to 72. Sentencing guidelines in the standard range are 54 to 72 months. That is 4.5 to 6 years in state custody as the minimum. So in other words, the low end of the standard range of the sentencing guidelines for this conviction would be 4.5 to 9 years in state prison. The high end of the standard range would be 6 to 12 years in state prison. There is a range above that, the aggravated range. That would start at 6 years, 6 to 12. And at the top end, it would be 7 to 14 years in state prison. And then there's also what they call the mitigated range at the bottom. This is usually for people who plead guilty, or for people who cooperate, or for people who in some other way have shown some kind of substantial mitigation. It's called the mitigated range. And that is 12 months less than 54. So that would be 3.5. So the bottom of these guidelines is 3.5 to 7 years in state prison. The standard range goes between 4.5 and 6 years, 4.5 to 9 years, 5 to 10 years, which is what we asked for, 6 to 12 years in state prison. The aggravated range would be 6 to 12, 6.5 to 13, 7 to 14 years in state prison. But that is not what happened here. I mean no disrespect to the court, and I say this sincerely when I say I am deeply disappointed with this outcome, which is not just below the bottom end of the guideline for a defendant who did not accept responsibility by pleading guilty, who went to trial anyway. It's way below the bottom end of the sentencing guidelines. A person who already had about 10 months in was given 9 months. 9 months to 23. Not even a state sentence, county sentence. Go home now. That's the outcome that we actually saw here. And we saw that outcome. And once again, I believe the taxpayers have been well served by Judge Bronson. He works hard. He's smart. He does his research. But I am deeply disappointed with a verdict that I think makes people lose faith in the criminal justice system. And those are not actually my words. Those are words coming from members of the family of Eddie Irizarry. Those are words coming from a law student who watched the hearing and walked out wondering if he should be a lawyer.
So we're going to leave it there. I think you get the message and where the concern lies. And obviously Judge Bronson issued a sentence that was way below the sentencing guidelines. And District Attorney Larry Krasner, who was just speaking on that point. And I want our listeners and viewers to understand why it's so important to learn about judicial candidates and participate in elections. We just had an election for judges at every level, at the local level, state level, at the highest level, the Supreme Court in Pennsylvania. And we had very little voter participation. And so the result, when people don't participate, they don't learn about the candidates, they don't know enough to vote for them, is we have judges who do things like this. This judge at some point will be up for re-election. And if people care about these type of issues, then they can remember this case and they can vote accordingly. And so that's why at the Hall Monitor, we cover judicial races, we've interviewed judicial candidates, and we cover cases like this because these are the moments where we are wondering what happened, where is the accountability? And as District Attorney Krasner said, he described how cases like this erode public trust in the judicial system. So unfortunately, that was the outcome. That brings this case to a close. Right now, a civil case is pending. Of course, we will follow that. As they may go to trial, they may settle, but we'll continue looking at that. But for now, at least the criminal process has concluded. So I did want to bring an update on that case since we've been following it for so long. It is really interesting to be a reporter here for Hall Monitor to see the arc of a case from the time the incident occurred to all of the public pressure demanding charges we filed, to the trial, to the sentencing hearing, and here we are now. So it has been really interesting to be able to cover that case in that way. I do have one more update to share, and that is, again, continuing our coverage about public media. Last week, when we were on the show, we were discussing the rescission cuts that had been proposed by President Trump. Congress had 45 days to expire. They had up until last Friday to make a decision. And so both the House and the Senate voted to accept the rescission package. They did make a small amendment, but ultimately it passed in both houses. It now goes to President Trump to sign. And what that rescission package did was actually claw back over $9 billion of funding for both U.S. aid, which makes up the majority of that funding, about $8 billion, and $1.1 billion that had been previously approved through legislation for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. What does that mean? Well, that means that CPB, which distributes funds to public media stations and to networks like PBS and NPR and community radio stations, will not be issuing a lot of grants this year. In fact, they already started the process of not distributing funds as they awaited this rescission process. Now, in my research about public media and the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and talking to many general managers across the country, I discovered that many stations, especially in the larger markets, their budget accounts for about anywhere from 10 to 15% of funding from the Corporation of Public Broadcasting. And so that basically means that most stations who are in large markets will be able to absorb those cuts, either by laying staff off, increasing fundraising, or finding other grants to supplement or fill the gaps. And you saw on Friday, as soon as the House voted to accept the rescission package, that many stations were sending out fundraising emails right away. However, there are a number of stations in rural areas, especially in red states and places like Alaska, where those public media stations budget about 60 to 70%. It comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Those stations are in trouble. They are definitely in danger. And not only does the majority of their budget come from CPB, in many of those areas, they are the only source of local news. They are the only broadcaster that's providing educational programming. They are the only broadcaster that's providing emergency alert information. And so there are many parts of the country that still have a lack of access to local news. And so it is quite surprising that so many Republicans voted to defund public media in their own states and rural areas, where people not only receive, educational programming news, but they get those emergency alerts that we're seeing being critical with the increase of all this flooding and storms and wildfires. So I think we've yet to see the fallout of that. We'll probably see a lot of layoffs. We'll probably see public media stations have to sell off their license or transfer the license. And unless Congress does something else to fund those stations, which actually some Republicans were trying to do, they were trying to make an amendment to get an exception for some of these rural stations, but they weren't able to do so. So for now, waiting for President Trump to sign that package. And we suspect the next round of rescission cuts will target education. So we'll have to bring Lisa Haver back on to discuss that possibility.
All right. Well, thank you, Vanessa, very much. And we'd like to thank Lisa Haver for being with us on the show. And we will be back next week on Hall Monitor.